guys, it's Rachel with Be Heal Dog Training. Sorry I didn't have tips for you over the weekend. Let's see, Saturday I spent the day working with Portia. If you haven't seen her yet, check out on the Facebook page. She's that little black floofball puppy, Sarah's puppy. And so we were working together to get some puppy training content, and we were trying to get a lot of new stuff put together for you guys. So Saturday, pretty much the whole day was spent working between getting videos and content of working with her and making plans and putting a lot of stuff together. And then Sunday, yesterday, there was just a whole lot going on. So I apologize for not having these tips to you, but I'm back today, and we're going to talk about using markers in training, and that is not markers I keep color with. Markers are referring to either like words or a clicker in your training. So let's start by talking about what a marker is. A marker is meant to mark a moment in time that you want to be significant to the dog. So typically we use markers to teach yes and no. And so what that looks like when we're teaching a new behavior. And this is the concept behind clicker training. So I clicker train dogs. You can also use a marker word instead of a clicker. But the idea is that a reward is given every time that you use a marker. Kind of saying that backwards. You provide a marker when the dog is doing something that is going to warrant a reward of some sort. So typically what that looks like is a click and food. When we're shaping new behaviors and we're teaching the dog something new, every time they do something correct, it'll be click and food. So initially we need to charge that marker or to teach the dog what the marker means, and that would just look like, if we're clicker training, we would literally stand there with the dog if this is the first time we've ever pulled out the clicker, and we click food, until the dog starts to understand that every time they hear the click, that food is coming. So that first time that you are teaching the dog what a marker is, you're going to click and give food immediately. Now what happens is once the dog understands what the click means, and you'll know when the dog understands what the click means. And again, you could use a word like yes. And once they understand when you say yes that food is coming, then what happens is you can apply this in your training so that you don't have to feel like you are needing to move fast as the speed of light to get a treat to the dog's mouth so that they know they did something right. So for example, when we're teaching the down command, I like to teach that with leash pressure and food. And let's say that I have a dog that when I provide leash pressure, they're really unsure about it and they don't want to go into the down and they resist. I may give some leash pressure, and the moment they come down a little bit, I'm going to click and give them food and teach them that yes, when you start to move down, that is the correct thing to do. Once you do that a few times, the dog is a lot more willing to move down with that leash pressure until you can get them all the way into a down command. And so then I would use that marker when the dog is actually going into the down to say, yes, that's what I want you to do. And then, and I'm moving kind of fast talking about this in general because we're just talking concepts here. I do have videos on YouTube that breaks this down more step by step if you're wanting to literally learn a how-to. But anyway, once the dog has learned a command and we're teaching something more along the lines of duration and holding that command for longer, then what I may do is tell the dog down, and when they go into a down, I'll wait for a couple of seconds and then click, and that means food is coming. And why the marker is so important is because you can just apply a marker much faster than you can give a reward, and it lets you have that little bit of a time cushion between when the dog does something right and when they get the reward. And that way you don't have to have a bunch of food in your hand waiting right beside the dog's nose, which would be very distracting to the dog. Instead, you can have your food in your treat pouch and not be distracting the dog with that, and instead that frees up your hands to do things with the dog. And anytime they do something right that is going to get them a reward, you can click, and that just, again, tells the dog in that exact moment, this is what I want you to do. And so it just lets your training get more precise, and it really helps to clarify things for the dog. And another important part about markers is we want them to be very neutral. And we'll talk about this more in a moment when I talk about marking no and correcting behaviors. But we want our markers to be very neutral. So when I reward a dog, a clicker, again, this is why I love a clicker, is because it's just a sound. It's the exact same sound every time. Again, you can say the word yes to mark a behavior that's correct, but what you don't want to do is the dog does something right. Again, we'll go back to that down command. You get the dog in a down and you go, yes, good job, and the dog is going to jump up out of a down because they're so excited. So if you're using a verbal marker, you want to make sure that it's very neutral. Dog goes into a down and you just go, yes, and they know that that means a reward is coming. And it just lets your training session be nice and calm so that the dog can really absorb what it is that you're teaching it. And it's not that we're not excited for our dogs, but it's that we want to keep them in a calm mindset so that they are able to absorb things the most effectively. Because if they get all wound up and overly excited, then it's going to be hard for them to actually listen to what it is that we're telling them. Now, when we talk about marking no behaviors, those are unwanted behaviors, and it's still important to use a marker, and I use the word no as my marker, before applying my punisher. And I've talked about this before, I have other videos that talk about this before, but the way that you stop an unwanted behavior is to apply a proper punisher, a proper correction, a consequence for that behavior, and that's going to stop the behavior. So that's something we may use, for a dog who's jumping or barking in the crate. We'd say no, and the barking at the crate I'll use as the example here. So when we have dogs being super noisy in the crate, one really easy way to correct that is through the use of either a bonker or a remote collar. A bonker is just a rolled up towel, a basic cotton towel that you roll up and you would throw at the crate when they're barking. A remote collar, obviously you'd push the button and the dog would get a stem at a corrective level to stop the barking. But you can use the word no to mark that behavior. And if you have a remote collar, when we're talking the barking in the crate thing, oops, sorry, my phone's making noise there. The ringtone on my phone is my daughter yelling and singing and stuff. That's why that's kind of funny sounding. But, if you've got a remote collar and the dog's barking in the crate, that's easy enough just to hit the button. But a lot of times when our dogs are in the crate, they're not wearing their remote collars, right? And so that's where a marker can become really, really important. So picture this scenario. You have the dog barking in the crate and you walk over from wherever you are. Maybe you even have to get out of bed to go correct the dog. And when you walk into the room where the dog is, they see you and they stop. A lot of times people worry about correcting at that point because they go, well, now the dog's behavior has stopped. Are they going to understand if I apply the correction right now? Are they going to understand what that's for? That's where the marker word comes in. So you're in the other room. You've already taught the dog the word no, followed immediately by a correction, just like we talked about with teaching yes in the clicker and food. Once the dog understands the word no, you have a much longer amount of time before you need to apply that punisher, and the dog's going to understand what it's for. So once the dog understands the word no, and that's really, really important, in order to have a dog understand the word no as a marker word, you have to first know and immediately correct. Know and correct. But once they understand no, and no has a lot of value and meaning, then the dog gets that whatever they're doing at the point in time that you say no, they need to stop doing. So let's say you're struggling with a dog barking in the crate, they're not wearing a remote collar, you have to get up to walk over to throw a bonker at the crate or pop the crate. You're going to first from the other room say no while the dog is barking. And again, just like with the marker words for yes, we want to keep our marker for no very, very calm. We're not yelling and screaming no, we're not mad, we're not angry, because again, we're not trying to emotionally charge the dog. We're not trying to train through fear, but we are trying to train through sorry, my phone's going up. But we are trying to, that totally lost my train of thought. We're not trying to negatively charge our dogs and have them be afraid, but we do want them to understand that there will be a consequence for an action. So you're in the other room, the dog starts barking, you go no. That gives you, a good amount of time. It might take you 30 seconds to get up out of bed and walk over to the crate and throw the bonker. When you really think about it, 30 seconds is a long time, and a lot of people would hesitate to correct the dog if the dog has stopped barking. However, if you marked that barking with the word no while they were doing it, and then you follow through with your correction, even if the actual correction occurs a little bit later, the dog understands what it's for. And so you can still apply your correction that way. So again, we use markers with both yes and no, and in both situations you want to be extremely neutral because we're just trying to be calm and matter of fact about everything we do so that the dog can understand and absorb what it is that we're teaching them and not be emotionally charged one way or the other. So that's what I've got for you today on markers. Hopefully that helps you with your own training with your dogs, and not feel like you need to get a rush with things. You don't need to rush to be throwing food down their throats when they're doing the right thing. And if you hear people that say that if you miss your timing, that you have to punish a behavior the exact second that it's happening, that's not true. It can be very difficult to do that. Marker words, markers like a clicker, things like that really, really help to give you just that little bit of a cushion in the amount of time before you apply your reward or your punisher. So hopefully that helps you guys. I'm going to go get back to work on these other projects that I have going on with Be Healed. And I'm also out helping my dad today build a shed, so I'm going to go check in on that. Hope you guys are doing well, and I will check back in tomorrow with you with another tip.